It is a very quiet UPMC Lemieux complex. I am Dan Kingerski on the Pittsburgh Hockey Now and the National Hockey Now YouTube channel. Kyle Dubas wrapped up his season-ending press conference here earlier this morning. We're about, we're a couple hours removed from it. Check out all the content on PittsburghHockeyNow.com, of course. But just a couple of the notes before we get to the Q&A. I got the first question on Friday, believe it or not. I think that might be the first time in my life I've ventured to ask the first question in a press conference like that. Surprised me, like, oh, okay, I'll go first. Usually that's Seth's job. I asked Dubas in these words: with your season on the line, Alex Nedeljkovic started the final 14 games of the season. What does that say about his future with the organization and Tristan Jarrys? Now, to my surprise a little bit, I think we can pull the answer out of what Dubas said, because Dubas told Nedeljkovic, according to Dubas, he told Nedeljkovic on Thursday, on breakup day, that the Penguins have a young goalie pushing for time. That's Joel Blomqvist, and they're going to watch the AHL playoffs to see how Blomqvist does and make a decision. Basically, what Dubas was saying was, if Blomqvist is ready, and they're going to watch the next couple of weeks to see if he is, you're going to see a Jarry-Blomqvist tandem next season, which of course means that Nedeljkovic will get paid, just not by the Penguins next season. So, unfortunately, it looks like Ned's time with the Penguins is done, unless they deem Blomqvist not quite ready. But even then, if you're Nedeljkovic, you're going to come back on a one-year deal until Blomqvist is ready? I don't see that. So fare thee well, Alex Nedeljkovic. It was a blast. The Myles Garrett jersey and so many other things. He was a bit of a spark, both for the team in those final 14 games, but also it was nice to have some personality in the room. The Penguins can be a bit staid and serious. Need a few more characters floating around in there. Also, Dubas said the conversations with Sidney Crosby need to remain private. So, yes, they'd like him to stick around, and that's kind of where he left it. Now, comparing that to past general managers, I suspect we're going to see a few people look for daylight between Dubas and Crosby there. Crosby also saying he's going to take some time to deliberate and decide what he wants for his future, all of that sort of thing. It compares to past GMs. Ray Shero, I recall, saying we're going to give Sidney Crosby a check and he's going to sign it, or a blank check and he's going to sign it. I think Jim Rutherford always echoed that sentiment as well, that Crosby would just be a Penguin for life. I would have preferred Dubas to use those words. He didn't, so there's maybe a little bit of wiggle room, some hope for you Avalanche fans out there. I wouldn't put too much hope into it. But Dubas didn't slam the door either. So he also said Chris Letang is getting a second opinion. He's been dealing with significant injuries all season. He implied that surgery, or at least I inferred that surgery was a very likely outcome. Matt Nieto also has to make a decision here, getting a third and final opinion if he has to have surgery. Nieto is signed next season, although I know none of you know who he is. I other than the mustache, I can't say I had a chance to talk to him more than once or twice before he left the lineup November 30th after playing just 22 games. And I thought it was interesting, Dubas kind of squirmed and grimaced a little bit when asked about Ryan Graves. He didn't shy away from Graves' poor performance this season. He said there's no dancing around it. And the litany of things, check out the article on Pittsburgh Hockey Now, that was the first thing I wrote. The litany of things that he listed that Ryan Graves has to improve this summer, even though he put a positive spin on it, it was no small list. Increase his mobility, increase his strength, and essentially get better at defending in the defensive zone. Those are basically the three core tenets of every defenseman who's ever played for the Penguins. And he has to improve all three. That was a moment, I thought. So that's going to lead us into the Q&A, because a few of you asked about Ryan Graves. Before we do that, I've been having an issue with full phone. Let me see, make sure it's still recording. Yep, good. I'm going to have to do this quickly because this is what took an hour and a half after the Islanders game. Has just been clearing out video after video of space on my phone. As I see it, who I'm pretty sure was one of my original followers back when I was on the radio. Given Dubas' comments on Friday, what is there to be excited about next season? Well, first, listen, it's not my job to tell you what to be excited about. I'm not going to be excited about anything other than covering hockey. What I think you're asking, probably a bit about new blood. I think, you're going to see St. Ivany and probably Ryan Shea in the lineup quite a bit. Maybe John Ludwig sticks around in the lineup. I think two of those three, St. Ivany almost a given for next season. I think you're going to see Sam Poulin really get his best and final shot come training camp. He has to improve some things. Most notably, his skating. You can't play in motion quite as much in the NHL as the AHL, so he's going to have to work on his acceleration and be a little more fleet of foot. I also think you're going to have, besides Joel Blomqvist in the lineup next year, which seems to me to be a given, I think you're going to have at least a significant trade or two this summer. What that means, I'm not entirely sure. That will depend on the other general managers, won't it? The last 14 games, though, once they had that surgical procedure done, I can report this now. The Penguins team had to have a cranial extraction from a colon. And once they got it together, listen, I'm a firm believer that organizations have momentum, not just a team level game to game, but an organization momentum. And going back to like December of 2022, when the Fire Hextall stuff really began and the negativity around Hextall and Brian Burke, things went sideways for the Penguins until it finally almost imploded at the trade deadline of 23, and then did implode basically, I think, after the trade deadline. They missed the playoffs, and I think there was just a stench. There has been so much negativity, it carried over into this season. The Penguins were always treading water, trading sideways, pick your idiom. And then they finally something snapped. Sidney Crosby, Alex Nedeljkovic, some young guys in the lineup, all of the above. And then the Penguins sort of began to build some positive momentum. I think that positive momentum will carry over into next season, even if it is 6 months, dear Lord, 6 months away. Drizzy 16, trade, Jarry. What would a trade look like? Would they get something back, or would it be a salary cap dump? Honestly, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I'd like to tell you X and Y, but we saw the goalie market was so clogged this past season. Even with a rising salary cap, I don't know that we can really definitively say what a goalie's value is. Jonas Korpisalo signs, a 4-year, $20 million deal, or a 5-year, $20 million deal. I don't think more than 2 teams would have signed that, but Ottawa was desperate enough to do that. And that kind of goes to Steve's question. I'm going to bookend these two here. Steve asks, if Skinner flames out in Edmonton, would they come calling about Jarry? On paper, you'd say yes until you look at the salary cap. Edmonton is still straddled with Jack Campbell in the AHL. Skinner makes 2.6. So you're already over $6 million with those two goalies. And I don't think they're going to give, even if they were willing to give up Skinner, do you want Jeff Skinner if he flames out in Edmonton? Do you want him coming to the Penguins? So my guess is that Tristan Jarry is the Penguins goalie. full stop. He will be the Penguins goalie until Blomqvist kind of shoves him out of the way, in much the same way Jarry did to Matt Murray, much the same way Matt Murray did to Marc-Andre Fleury, and so on and so forth. So I think that's the situation that you're going to be watching for, at least in terms of the Penguins goalies. Let's see here. Number 3. Will the Penguins dump any of Riley Smith, Noel Acciari, Ryan Graves, etc.? Let's go back to this. I don't understand why you're all putting Noel Acciari on the underachievers list. If you're doing that, you weren't paying attention, I think, to the nitty-gritty details and what's necessary for winning hockey. The Penguins have a great lack of the things that Acciari brings. Acciari's also fast as lightning, gritty, physical. He's that warrior, blood and guts, glue type guy. You don't get rid of that. It only makes, what, $2 million? So we'll pump the brakes on trying to get rid of Acciari. In terms of a fourth line center, that's exactly what you want. Riley Smith, Ryan Graves. Riley Smith is probably the most tradable because of his track record and having just 1 year left on a contract. So an organization would not have to suffer long-term effects by acquiring Riley Smith. The problem with that is then the Penguins have to replace him. I tend to think even if they had to eat a little bit of salary, I don't think that the Penguins were a great fit for Smith. I don't think it was Pittsburgh and all of that stuff, but it wasn't a great fit. In talking with Smith, and I hinted at this really strongly, but I didn't say it specifically earlier this season. So for those of you who know how to read between the lines, I was saying it loud and clear. Talking to Riley Smith, I think it was in Seattle when Sullivan first put him with Lars Eller. He talked about enjoying playing with Eller because of the consistency. Predictability, I think was his word. Playing with Evgeny Malkin must have driven him nuts if he's looking for predictability. So there's that. Bunting, I think, did a much better job. Bunting just did what Bunting does, and Malkin adjusted to Bunting, which was great for the line. Smith doesn't necessarily have that kind of game where he can force a center into battle areas and greasy spots and all of those sorts of things. Let me make sure we're still recording. Cool. We still are. So that's that. I don't think there's a market for Ryan Graves. I think they'd have to eat a lot of salary, give up a draft pick. They're really. I think your play with Ryan Graves, unfortunately, because he's got 5 years left. They might have to bury him in the AHL for a spell. They might just listen. And given Dubas's comments on Friday, improve his strength and mobility. Are you kidding me? That kind of says to me that he came to the Penguins not fully prepared for what was needed. That's my inference. And I'm not quite sure where the iPhone stopped recording. I know we were talking about Ryan Graves. Side note, isn't it awkward that, in fact, as the iPhone 15 advertises more storage, everyone's iPhone 14 is filling up? Anywho, so we were talking about Ryan Graves. I'll just put the cap on it here and say that I think burying him in the AHL is entirely a possibility if he doesn't come next season fully prepared for peak and optimal performance. I think it has to be wildly disappointing to Dubas. The facial expression said it all. That Graves never found his niche with the Penguins. In fact, check out that story. I went through some of the analytics too. Everything was just lower with Ryan Graves. So that was part of the question. They're going to dump Riley Smith or Ryan Graves, Noel Acciari. If I've repeated this, I'm sorry. Noel Acciari is everything you want in a fourth line center. Stop lumping him in with the underachievers. Just full stop. Stop doing that. Warrior, glue guy. You're not going to get better for only $2 million. Good. We're good on that. Riley Smith, I think, is an entirely different scenario. Him playing with Evgeny Malkin didn't work. And talking to Smith in Seattle, and you saw part of our conversation. That was the day I asked him about, the rumors he was unhappy in Pittsburgh and such. He liked playing with Lars Eller because of the predictability, the stability factor, playing with Eller. Kyle Dubas essentially said the same thing on Friday, that he thought Eller and Smith were a better match than Smith and Malkin. And that kind of goes to the next question. But let me maybe add this before we jump into the joinder. Riley Smith only makes $5.5 million for next season. If a team felt he was a good fit for them, they're not stuck long term with Riley Smith. So he would have, I think, more trade value than maybe we give it credit for. But I think we'll see him next season, and that's part of the Penguins' balance. Having a scorer like Riley Smith on the third line with Lars Eller helps with depth, helps with everything. And you get into the middle of next season, and if it's not working, then you look for the exit ramp on that. Because Shane asks, PK Subban says if they had kept Gensel, they had a better shot of making the playoffs. Well, actually, I disagree with PK. And here's why. With Jake Gensel in the Penguins lineup, they were 9, 10, 11 points out of a playoff spot. They weren't any better. Michael Bunting, while not Jake Gensel's equal, changed the Penguins lineup in several ways. He added that grit and the physicality, but he added more balance as well. He dragged Evgeny Malkin into the greasy areas on the ice. Michael Bunting didn't worry about where Malkin was playing. Malkin was worried about where Bunting was playing, and that changed the dynamic entirely of the Penguins' second line. It improved it remarkably. So if you look at the balance with O'Connor, Crosby, and Rust, Bunting, Malkin, Smith, and Eller, that's a better lineup than Gensel, Crosby, Smith, Malkin, and let's say O'Connor and Eller. It just a lot better, a lot deeper with Bunting. And, you get those prospects. Who knows what's going to happen in the next year or two. Even if they weren't the top tier prospects from the Carolina system, there's still some talent there, and you might see it a little bit next year. Ponomarev, I think that's how you say it, will be a candidate or contender for an NHL spot for the Penguins next season. So I think the Penguins actually benefited in the immediate from the Jake Gensel trade. Let's see here. Would Matt Cullen be a good replacement for Todd Reirden? No. That's pretty deep to get into. I think if Todd Reirden were going to be the scapegoat, he would have been on Thursday or Friday after all these press conferences, and Dubas would have been able to answer for it. I think Reirden keeps his position. You're free to react however you'd like on that. The power play was terrible. I think Bunting improved the power play, actually. So maybe that's a little bit of a saving grace, and they have something to build on next season. And that is going to be it. I've done this video like 3 times, but because of iPhone storage, it keeps stopping. Hopefully this is the last I have to do it. From Halifax, that amazing road trip back like October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. What an extraordinary start to this season. The locals and watching what they and how they participated in hockey and what they, how much they adored Sidney Crosby was amazing. And Alexander Keith's and a Donair, my favorite meal of the season, all the way through the end. And my least favorite spot on the NHL schedule, Long Island. If there was contraction, Long Island would be my first choice on that. So I'm done. From UPMC Lemieux Complex, we'll do these from the home studio from now on. I'm Dan Kingerski on the Pittsburgh Hockey Now and the National Hockey Now YouTube channel. Please have worked.